Ryan, welcome to B2B Unscripted.
Yeah,
Glad to have you.
thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, that's going to be a great conversation. So how do you introduce yourself when you meet someone in an elevator?
Oh gosh. I tell them I'm not in marketing because it's easier. I just say so my kids just say my dad's a business guy.
Oh,
That's what
good.
my kids say because that's really what I am. I think these days I'll call myself like a market researcher. I think for most of the part, people know that too. But if I'm talking to someone who is in our world, I would say I'm a qualitative market researcher and I specialize on buyer and market research to help, build out go-to-market strategies. Like that sounds more formal. That's
Yeah.
boring
No,
to say in an elevator ride, but that's
for
like
sure.
really true. That's the truth of what you are. Like I really try to get at the truth of like how and why buyers buy things.
I love that. So is it true you've done over 2,000 buyer interviews?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is true.
So what's something people still get totally wrong about research?
There's a lot. I mean, one thing is people don't necessarily think that first, they don't understand what research is for the most part. I'd say that's a big thing. There's fundamentals of research design that you need. And I think people don't understand what those are. I think people treat it as like what I do, which is qualitative research. A lot of people think that it's not statistically relevant. So it's not like worth anything. They think more is better. It's not. They think customers tell them the truth. They don't. And I think the key one is what I do is really the best way to de-risk that you're going to waste your resources and money on your go-to-market programs. That's the key one, because what I do, people have been doing for centuries. It's nothing new.
We were talking about this just before going on air.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great story, actually.
Yeah. The funnel one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of part of it, but I try to get at the truth of what buying journeys are. And I would argue the funnel is not an accurate representation of what a buying journey is. It shows you sort of maybe the steps a buyer might get into at a high level and maybe the order of activities. But what you're getting at is like the origin of the funnel in the first place. And a lot of people don't understand that the funnel was created by a gentleman in advertising because the sales team wanted sales enablement to convince people to buy advertisements. That's really what it is. So as a modern day term, the funnel was created so the sales team would have something on a slide deck to show prospects so they would try to convince them to buy something. Now, his name's Emil St. Elias, and he was right about some things, right? Because what he was trying to do was de-risk or reduce the perceived risks buyers had of buying advertising at the time, because people are like, what is this advertising? It was very new because this is like 1898. So that's what I do today. It's just as a researcher, I'm more thorough and there's more rigor in what I do. But back to your first question, people treat it as like this one-off thing that they can just, we'll send out a survey, have a couple conversations. That's not research, right? That's sort of just like a hot take of something. You have to do so much more than that to actually get a sense of like getting at the objective truth of like how you should be spending your money in the market.
So this saying that many companies have, saying like we're buyer-centric, in everything we do.
Yeah.
So why is it that it's the first thing that they let go when they have to cut budget? One of the first thing I would say is like considered as almost like a nice to have, or they consider having the truth internally. I spoke with a CRO last week. I was mentioning that to you, and you don't feel that there was an opening to go a bit deeper about understanding their buyers, to de-risk everything else, right?
Yeah.
I had a sense that they knew from the sales team what the buyer wants, what the buyer pain points are, what's their jobs to be done, all of those things. So what do you say about this?
I mean, they could be right, but how do they know? Right? And what confidence level do they have in the data? But that's not the question you asked. So the question you asked is like, why does this happen really? Why do people why did they move away from what they say they're buyer-centric, but why would they move away from research?
Yep.
So there's a lot of things. There's like our biases are there. So that drives our decision making. And in B2B, which is like a team sport really, because depending on the business model, different teams have different ways of interacting with the market and the customer, right? Everyone does at some point in some way. So their lens of who these people are is colored through the interaction. And that interaction is their lived experience, which is informing their point of view. But businesses, like buyer decisions are made outside of the business. They happen like in a person's brain when something is causing them to take action and they're prioritizing change. And they're going through a whole litany of options and considerations. And it's all in here. It's not like in the sales meeting. Most of the research tells us they've made a decision anyway before they get to sales.
Yep.
Right. That's what most of the research tells us. What they're doing is just making sure they're not making the wrong choice. It's not the sales team convincing them.
They're looking for, right?
Correct. So the sales team is often right and often is the first to say, well, we think something's off. But when you challenge them sometimes, I'm like, well, maybe we don't know enough. It becomes reverse. Well, no, I talk to them all day long. But they're talking them to a different contextual setting where people aren't always showing all their cards. They're trying to drive a sale forward. And it's very biased towards that intent. What I do is objective investigations around understanding what do buyers think about their options in the market and how do they make decisions about the things that are in front of them. It's a very different way of thinking about, people than the sales team does. So, but they cut it because they think they know the customer. And I hear that all the time. Well, we know our customer. And in some ways that is true. But what they know is a part of the customer's viewpoint. They don't often have like a collective whole of what this buyer actually thinks about things.
Gotcha. But how do you keep those interviews deep and honest when you have so many personas, right, to cover?
Yeah.
And things are moving fast. How do you make sure you cover the ground? Because that's the problem of many, or the challenge, I should say, of many B2B companies I work with. They have so many personas. They're into so many verticals. How do you make sure that you cover the ground properly?
Well, the first one is we have to figure out if all those are actually, personas and segments they should be investing money into going after. Sometimes people often will creep into other segments. To put it another way, there's no real good data, like straightforward studies done on why go-to-market programs fail. But there are lots of peer-reviewed academic studies that sort of tiptoe around the issue. If you synthesize all the data, you could draw a rough conclusion that about 1/3 of the time, go-to-market programs fail because of execution. And that's often what people default to. We just need to do more things, get into more conversations, go into more verticals, more.
More campaigns, blah, blah, blah.
But in reality, 2/3 of the time, go-to-market programs fail or stall because they don't understand the customer. So you have to decide. So to your question, like, I have to figure out, like, what do I want to know first based out of the interview? Because if I have confidence in the data, and I feel like I just want to shore up some things, well, I don't have to do deep dives. But if I am going to do, say I have to choose out of 4 segments, which one do I think makes the most sense? And I do have to do deep dive. You keep them honest by following the fundamentals of research design and the business objectives. What do we need to do in the business? Want to go after a new segment, okay? Or validate a segment. Great. How much information do we have in data? Are we confident about? Okay, we have XYZ. Okay, what data do we need? Okay. And how are we going to go get it? And what are the stakes of the decision? So, and I'll keep it honest. So that's how, like, I measure the depth of what I need. I keep it honest by putting guardrails in place around, these are the things I want to talk about. And this is like the psychographics, firmographics, and technographics of the buyer. Basically, I have a homogeneous sample. Because what would happen in your example, and I've seen this happen, we'll go and talk to all those segments all at once, and they just sort of mix and match them. But those are different buyers, right? More than likely, I can give you real life examples where I've seen solutions that are identical in one segment flop and another segment take off.
Why don't you give me one? Give me an example.
Okay.
I'd love that.
So if you go to my website, there's a company in Ottawa called Rewind. And they built the business, their software business. They built the business in the first few years as a Shopify app. And most people won't know who Shopify is now, e-commerce company worth billions of dollars, one of the most successful software companies to ever exist in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to grow, you can do a few things, right? You can build a product from scratch into new verticals, or you can acquire a business. So they acquired a business. They acquired a business that was fit into their product portfolio because their product was a backup and recovery software for Shopify stores, because Shopify didn't have an undo button at the time and still doesn't if you make big mistakes. So they acquired a backup and recovery product for GitHub. And GitHub is used by software developers. It's the largest code repository in the world. The founding team that built the thing solved their own problem, because that's what founders mostly do. They solve their own problem. Great. That's how a lot of businesses start. But what they often don't do is the things I just talked about, which is expand their point of view beyond the sample of one that they are. And they think early adopters are a signal that a market is ready for mass adoption. Not always the case. So when they merged two companies, the founding team said, okay, developers are the market. We know we have early customers who solve their own problem. Can't wait to go make money together. Great. Looking forward to that. Sales team comes back a few months later. Yeah, our cold outreach is not landing. Like, developers don't seem to want to talk to us. Well, that's interesting, because based on our discussions, that should be the primary segment that's going to adopt GitHub. All developers use GitHub. What is happening? Hey, Ryan, can you go figure it out? Sure. So when I talked to developers, it was a nice to have. Most of them were like, yeah, this is cool and all, but I can just clone my laptop. I can clone all my repos, drop them on my laptop. If they get nuked, I don't care, really. I can spin up more code. Who cares? Like, the only people who saw it as a valuable solution in their processes were people who really valued what was in their code. But most developers are just one developer with some lines of code out of thousands of lines of code in one product. So it's like, what has happened? It was quickly apparent that this segment that the founding team said was so important, didn't care. But there was another segment in there of IT directors, very small few, that had bought the product. And I don't know if have you ever worked in IT?
No.
Okay. So I learned this.
Close.
Okay. I learned this because this is my job. And there's a process in IT called disaster recovery. It has been around for decades. It used to be a thing big when server rooms were in a building and we'd go and check on them. And if all your data was lost, they would have a redundancy backup. They could just go boop, and all the data would come flowing back into the servers. Well, what had happened in the last few years since then was everything had moved to the cloud. But IT directors were still responsible for disaster recovery, because business processes don't go away. Problems don't go away. Needs don't go away. It's just the way we solve them change over time, as new technology unlocks latent demand in the market. So when I was talking to these people, they said, well, since we've shifted all our integral operations like coding and software development from these servers to the cloud, I needed a solution that would help with my disaster recovery strategy for these cloud operations. So yeah, this product was a no-brainer. Same product. Didn't do anything different. But in two different segments, one side was like, who cares? And the other segment's like, give it to me now.
Interesting. So it resonated completely different with the two types of buyers.
But it did nothing different. It's just contextually, how does the buyer think about these things and why would they care?
Yeah.
That's the job of research. Because it seems so trite. And a sales team might say, oh yeah, well, IT directors, yeah, they're coming in, let's go sell to them. But if you don't know that thing I just told you about how their business model works, how are you going to sell a thing that supports that business model if you don't have the contextual understanding and understand how it changes and evolves over time?
I see. So how do you know if you need to do research? Because I might have
I just gave you one
spot.
I just gave you one
might have
good
a blind
signal.
spot, right?
Yeah, I gave you one good answer. Sales team is like waving red flags, because at the end of the day, that we have to help them, and that's like a big part.
Coming from a growth marketing kind of
Yes.
and sales background, I would say, honestly, one of the need I would like to know is, let's say one of my clients, I'd like to know if we are actually crafting the right messages and are we landing properly, and then the targeting of those campaigns and creatives, right? I think at the end of the day, it's fundamental. But how do you challenge a company to be humble enough, or a go-to-market team to be humble enough to say, you know what, we might not have all the truth. We might want to step back here and go back to fundamentals and make sure we are grounded and de-risking our hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment in paid media every year.
Yeah. So there's a few things. I want to answer, though, some other things you should find, like signals, right? So no engagement with any of your marketing. If no one's like sharing, commenting, talking, saying, oh, that makes sense for what I do. I never thought of that. That's a key giveaway there. No response to cold outreach. I mean, in theory, cold outreach should bring people, some people, there should be some eyeballs. I know I've interviewed people that have still bought something from cold outreach. And when you ask them why, it's because they say, oh, it's very contextually relevant to what I was doing. I can see, like, they talk to the things that I do, and they knew all the words I use, and they knew how my business worked. Or if you listen to sales calls and prospects sound like they're tire kickers rather than asking deep questions about how this thing is going to fit in what they do. And those are all signs. If they can't start using the words back to you that you're giving out to them, those are key things that you probably don't have a good understanding of them. But to your point, like your question was like, how do I get people on board, right? It all comes down to like, how much money do you want to waste? That's it. I told you, like, go-to-market, the most 2/3 of go-to-market failures are not because of execution, it's because of lack of understanding. And I can show people all the data, like I can share, anyone who wants to listen to this, they want to DM me, I'll send them all their research. They make a decision themselves. The best way to get people on board is, one, saying like, we need a good sense of how the market thinks. So when we go and spend 30% of our annual revenue on a go-to-market strategy, we're not going to set it on fire. Like, I think executives understand that. I think savvy executives understand getting the voice of the customer in the room. Not all of them do, but I think veteran ones do.
Yep.
The other thing I would say, though, is there are so many ways now to get at in-market buyers without having to talk to sales or getting their permission as a marketing team. You can do that without them. I mean, I have, in my career, when I've been told, no, you can't talk to a customer, I went into CRM, started calling people anyway. And they did not like that at all. But I didn't care because I needed to understand how people made decisions. Because if I can't understand how they make decisions, I'm going to waste my money on my marketing programs. And then that budget that money doesn't come back. It's gone.
Yep, for sure.
It's capital resource allocation. I know it may not be the answer everyone wants to hear, but that's the key thing. It's like every business is a bet in a market. So you have to de-risk the odds of you not winning the bet.
Exactly. So where do you get started though? Let's say a $10 million ARR company in a very niche market. How do you determine, like, what's the scope of this buyer research that needs to be done? Of course, it needs to be first established. What do we want to find out, or what do we want to uncover? What's the problem? What led us to look into research as a potential avenue for us to get clarity? Where do you get started?
Yeah. What do you want to do? That's the key one. Like, I'm going to be very sort of like generalist about it because these are the building blocks of research design, right? But it's really business development at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Open any intro to business textbook. Is what I'm going to tell you was there since like the 50s. So what problem are you wanting to tackle? Like, what do you want to do in the business? What information do you need to get that, to make that decision and de-risk that decision? What are the stakes of this decision? If you're just testing messaging in a marketing campaign, well, the stakes are low. Like, I was like, well, we have a pretty good handle, but we want to try something fun and new and quirky. Low stakes. We want to invest $2 million into a new segment over the next fiscal year. High stakes. How much data do you have to be able to de-risk that decision? So if we have a very good level of confidence, we feel like we have things like all the firmographics, psychographics, technographics, how buyers make decisions, their vendor selection process, the core business processes that we need to support, a list of competitive intelligence so we can understand how we're going to position in the market. If you don't have any of that stuff, you got to go get it. If you have most of that stuff, sort of like you feel like you're 60% of the way there, well, then maybe you just need a few interviews, maybe a few surveys. You have zero, you got a lot of work to do, right? So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
That's like the way you got to go through this, because I'm not dogmatic about this. I'm not going to tell anyone to go and do 8 months of research and talk to 50 buyers if they don't need to do that. Some market agencies I know tell companies to do that, and that is wrong, because that's a waste of money. But if you do need a deep dive, maybe you need 12 people in one segment, and that's of the person who is on the hook to make the decision of the thing that you want to sell to them. So yeah,
so it could be a mix of your current customers and
absolutely
prospective one, right?
Yeah. What I'm finding these days too, because we can't not talk about AI, right, is people are now using all their data and sort of aggregating them together and making decisions. Whereas in my world, in the market research world, 20 years ago, I might go and do in-depth market research over 2 months and bring you this giant strategic document. That's not what's happening anymore. I don't think companies need to do that necessarily. Sometimes I'm hired to go do 7 interviews. I can turn things around in 2 weeks. We'll put all the data with their win-loss and their customer sales calls and some of their dashboard stuff and this, and this, and it all gets put into Google Notebook. And then we come out the other end with messaging, positioning, and so on, right? So it's a very different world, but you still you have to understand what do I have and what do I not have? And what are the stakes of the decision?
So you're saying also AI is making it easier to leverage this richness of information.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because you can then just inform your GPT or whatsoever you're using as a fundamental element to craft everything else moving forward or help you.
Absolutely. How I do my work is I'll use Claude for what we would call qualitative thematic analysis. It's a fancy word that sociological researchers use, and it's almost overkill for B2B research. But it's very helpful because it basically, you're tracking and getting at the patterns. They're always looking for something called thematic analysis, which is the equivalent of statistical relevancy in quantitative market research. In surveys, we look for statistical relevancy. In qualitative research, we go for thematic and meaning saturation, thematic saturation and meaning saturation. It's basically do I see patterns emerge, and can I have confidence that if I ask another person, those patterns and themes are going to emerge? That's the whole thing. I use Claude to extract those things because we used to do it by hand, or just on Word years ago. But LLMs are really, really good at finding themes and patterns in existing data. So I lean into it to find all the patterns and things that maybe I might even pick up with my own brain, but then I'm able to sort of understand, where the trends are, and then I watch for hallucinations. And then the next step is you combine it with all the other data and you start playing with messaging, positioning, go-to-market strategies. What are some things that are unique that we haven't tried that maybe we can try? And it's not going to give you the answers, but it gives you really strong directional signal now to then bring to a meeting and say, based on the data, here's all the things we could try that we're not doing.
Talking about things we can try and using the research. Leaders in general, they love certainty, right? So research isn't always that clean.
No.
So how do you address this? Or how do you talk about, we don't know for sure without losing trust with them?
Yeah. The researcher side will say, well, we talk levels of confidence in the data. And you can check for that in qualitative as well, where I do this in my work. So I'll have AI fact check the data and the output that it's already done. So what are the levels of confidence in these themes and so on. Now that's very nerdy researchy talk, right? And at the end of the day, an executive might be like, yeah, so what? What I do also in my work is everything is just soaked in voice of the customer, voice of the market. So whenever I have a conclusion or a theme that I have confidence in, you'll see 5 quotes or even a sizzle reel of buyers talking to that thing. Because if I show a CEO, these people who are ideal buyers said they care about this thing. Look that's coming out of the words that are coming out of their mouth right now in real time. that is very impactful compared to like me putting something on a slide deck and giving you a point. If the customers are saying it, that is a totally different sort of, it just sinks in more into people's brains around like it's important.
Mm. And what do you say to someone saying like, you know what, ChatGPT deep research can give me all this information. I don't need to do research. Like it can go and create different website, Reddit,
Well, sure.
and name it to a certain degree. But how do you then have certainty that it didn't hallucinate, like you're saying, and ground it into something more? The methodology that you're using makes it bulletproof in some ways, right? It does guarantee the quality of the data that comes out of it. So how do you then address that objection against research to some way because of this new alternative that some people believe they have this magic formula now?
So that's like a whole other hour you could probably fill. But the short of it is, it'll get you some of the way there, but it is static data that the machines are trained on that may or may not be accurate. So what I mean by that is markets are not static. They're constantly moving. Things change all the time, right? Like the markets for, podcasting like this before COVID was different now probably than after COVID. Things are not sort of set in stone. So that's the first part. And the second part is the LLMs aren't good at understanding subtext, nuance, meaning. So, and net new. So if you see something on a ChatGPT and you want to dive in deeper, you don't always have the ability to do that in like the depth that you want to. So I think it helps. It will definitely speeds and accelerates certain things. And we're talking like synthetic data is the one now people are talking about in research and like the value of it in different cases. I think for scoping and quick tests, it's great. For in-depth understanding of how people think, you can't get that in the ChatGPT. And I just had that call with someone who's in charge of go-to-market programs just before I talked to you. And they said the exact same thing. I use it for sort of quick hits. I don't use it for in-depth understanding.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you. Are you ready for some quick rapid fire question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love doing that.
Okay.
What's one question you always ask in a buyer interview that unlocks pure gold?
What did the sales team tell you that you thought was a lie?
Ouch. Yep. A book, a podcast, or a thinker that's shaped how you see research?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like a lot of stuff that's like on buyer psychology, behavioral economics. Like I don't care so much about like the tactician side of things. I care more about like that sort of, here's Nudge, Phil Agnew, Nudge. Phil really focuses everything on buyer psychology and science-driven and research-backed studies. That's the stuff I love because I'm very traditional and very in my approach to business. I think I like foundational sort of principles. I like the academic work that's been done over the last 30 years in behavioral economics and buyer psychology. I think some of it is so fascinating. And that's the stuff that we need to know as marketers because that's what we influence, right? We're businesses. And yes, there's pragmaticism, but we have to influence people at different degrees of like emotion, logic, and experience. So we have to like all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff's happening consciously in their brains as they're making decisions. So we need to understand how that stuff works.
Yeah, influence people internally and externally. Favorite aha moment from all those thousands of interviews? Do you have one that comes out? Must be hard. That's a tough one.
I think it's more like, I think we underestimate how much people want to be asked their opinion.
Are you suggesting that just having this type of conversation with a buyer kind of solidified the relationship even more with the company that you were doing the research on behalf?
Absolutely. A lot of times they're just so impressed that this is actually happening.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So a customer success manager or an account manager, when the company lands, a B2B company lands a new customer, I think they should take the time to understand why have they chosen
1,000%
them. What other companies were they considering? Where did they hear about them?
Yeah.
What's one thing that they are impressed with or not impressed with? Things of that nature, like almost like onboarding interviews.
hmm Yeah, everyone should. Now, the flip side of that is hard to get people on the line.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the challenge there, but the more, if you can build that in, even if it's one a month, and the closer you can do it after the sale, the better your chances of getting them, because it's still fresh for them. If it's like 6 months down the line, it's harder to get people on the phone because we're all busy.
Yeah, for sure. That must be the hard part in your job, to get people outside of work. What's one passion that you have that allows you to disconnect and refresh?
Just my kids, my family,
Yeah.
my wife.
Oh, very
Sounds-
nice. How old are your
I
kids?
know. 10 and 8.
10 and
Yeah.
8, almost close to mine, 10 and 12.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. It's like, I don't really have much time for much else. So I try to, anytime I have, it's them.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
So in closing, I wanted to ask you one prediction. Everyone loves prediction. Prediction you have about research over the next few years. Where do you think this AI era will bring research? Because things are going to get better with AI as well. Like you look at the shortfalls a little bit earlier, but at the same time, things are going to make research at scale even easier, I'm assuming. Where do you see your world, buyer research, evolving in the future context?
3 things. I think AI is going to do more of the heavy lifting, which I don't think is bad. We just have to know what it is and what is not. Sometimes you don't always need a wrench when you hammer. And we have to understand like its limitations. I think it's going to get faster. I can book a sample of in-market buyer interviews now for a company in like 3 days, right? It used to take weeks, maybe years ago. I can do it in a couple like hours. And 3, the price is going down. What used to be $50,000 projects, now you're seeing 10,000. So, but that's, I think, just business trends in general, right?
True.
Things get faster and
Commoditized to some degree.
automation creeps in and all sorts of things. So,
For
but
sure.
it unlocks the insights you need, right? So I think more mid-market companies that could not work with someone like me can now do that when they weren't able to maybe 5 years ago.
That's beauty. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. We'll put the links to your company, contentlift.io, I believe, and a link to your LinkedIn under this video. But thank you again for your time. This was amazing. For someone like me who hasn't been very much close to buyer research in the past, you kind of light some fire here about the importance of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Merci. And I had a great time. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.